Single father working Christmas Eve. The Apache woman who brought him fire changed everything. The wind blew hard that Christmas Eve, rattling the windows of the small house at the edge of town. Inside, John moved quietly through the narrow kitchen, careful not to wake his daughter, Emily. She was curled up on the couch, her small blanket pulled tightly around her shoulders, breathing softly in the rhythm of sleep. The house was warm enough, but not by much. The old heater wheezed and rattled every few minutes, sending out more noise than heat. John sighed, rubbing his hands together to keep warm. He looked around the tiny living room where a single string of Christmas lights flickered weakly on the windowsill. It had been a long day. One of many like it. John had worked at the gas station since early morning, stocking shelves and helping customers with tired smiles. But then he had hurried over to the diner to pick up his second job as a line cook for the evening. He barely had time to sit down and eat, let alone think about decorating or gifts. Christmas had always been complicated for him, but this year felt especially heavy. Emily was only 8, and he wanted to give her something special, something that would make her forget for a moment how different their life was from the families at school. But as he looked around the room, John realized he had very little to offer. The tree was just a small pine he had bought from a neighbor last week, leaning slightly to one side. There were only a few ornaments. Some he had made with Emily during the past days, others that had survived from previous years. There was no big gift waiting under the tree, no shiny surprises wrapped in colorful paper. Brats. John had spent all he could on groceries, and even that had been a struggle. He felt a familiar sting of guilt, a weight pressing down on his chest. Emily stirred slightly, mumbling in her sleep. John walked over to her and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "Sleep tight, pumpkin," he whispered. Breaths. She mumbled something unintelligible and snuggled deeper into her blanket. Watching her peaceful face, John felt both love and sorrow. He wanted to protect her from the world, from disappointment, from the cold reality of their small life, but he knew he could not shield her from everything. He had tried year after year to make Christmas special, but no matter how hard he worked, it never seemed enough. He returned to the kitchen and leaned against the counter, taking a deep breath. He thought about his own childhood, about the long nights he had spent in a house where warmth and laughter were rare. His parents had loved him, but they had been too busy with their own struggles to make holidays magical. Breaths. He had promised himself he would do better for Emily, but now he wondered if he was failing just like his parents had. The smell of dinner filled the room. A simple meal of soup and bread. John had tried to make it special, adding a little extra seasoning, arranging the bread on a small plate to make it look nicer. It was modest, but it was made with love. Still, he could not shake the feeling that it would not be enough to make Emily happy. He thought about the families he saw in the store earlier that day. Parents carrying large bags of gifts. Children smiling and laughing, the air filled with excitement and cheer. He had watched them from a distance, a quiet ache growing in his chest. He wanted that for Emily, but he had so little to give. The sound of the wind outside reminded him that winter had come in full force. He wrapped his hands around his mug of tea, trying to warm them. He had worked so hard today, but there was still more to do. The gas station would be open late, and he had promised the diner he would help with the evening rush. Breath. He felt exhausted, but he could not complain. Not out loud, not to anyone. He had to be strong for Emily. She depended on him, and he could not let her see his fatigue or his doubts. As he sipped his tea, John thought about the small joys he could give her. A story before bed, a warm blanket, a hug that lasted a little longer than usual. He reminded himself that these things mattered too, even if they were not flashy or expensive. Emily would remember the warmth of his love, the care he took in preparing her meals, the way he always made sure she felt safe. He hoped that would be enough. John moved to the living room, and gently shook Emily awake. "Hey, pumpkin," he said softly. "It's time to get ready for bed." Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep. She rubbed them with her small fists and gave him a sleepy smile. "Are we going to have Christmas today, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small but filled with hope. John smiled, kneeling beside her on the couch. "We are, sweetheart. It's Christmas Eve, and we'll make it special. Just you and me." Emily's face brightened, and she snuggled against him. For a moment the worries and exhaustion melted away, replaced by the warmth of their bond. John held her close, feeling a quiet strength growing inside him. After tucking Emily back under the blanket, John moved to the small fireplace in the corner of the room. The fire was weak, barely producing warmth, but it was enough to cast a soft glow across the room. He stared into the flames, thinking about how fragile life could feel sometimes, how easily hope seemed to flicker like the small flames before him. But he also thought about resilience, about the way people could endure even the hardest winters. He had survived so much in his own life, and now he had a reason to keep going. Emily needed him, and that gave him a sense of purpose stronger than any fatigue or worry. The night stretched on, and the house grew colder. John checked the windows and doors, making sure the wind could not creep inside. But he moved quietly, careful not to disturb Emily, and made one final cup of tea for himself. He carried it back to the living room and sat down in the chair nearest the fireplace, watching the tiny flames dance. The house was quiet, except for the occasional whistle of wind, the soft crackle of the fire, and Emily's gentle breathing. John's mind wandered as he sat there. He thought about the holidays he wished he could give her, the laughter he hoped to hear, the joy he wanted to see in her eyes. But he also thought about the strength they shared, the bond that could carry them through even the toughest times. He realized that while they might not have gifts or a big feast, they had each other, and that was something no one could take away. As the evening deepened, John felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope. He knew the night would be long, that he still had work to do and responsibilities to fulfill. But he also knew that he would find ways to make this Christmas memorable for Emily, even if it was through small gestures, quiet moments, and the love they shared. The fire flickered gently in the corner, a small reminder that warmth could be found even in the coldest nights. He took one last look at Emily sleeping peacefully and whispered, "We'll be okay, Pumpkin. We'll make it through."
And in that quiet house,
with the wind howling outside and the fire casting its soft light, John felt the first spark of hope for the holiday, a small but persistent warmth that promised a night of connection, love, and the possibility of something extraordinary, even in the midst of struggle. The streets outside were slick with ice, reflecting the dim glow of streetlights as John drove to the gas station for his late shift. The night was quiet, almost too quiet, broken only by the occasional sound of tires crunching over frozen patches on the road. He had been working double shifts for weeks now, and his body ached from standing for hours on end. His hands, roughened from years of labor, gripped the steering wheel tightly as he thought about Emily sleeping at home, safe under her blanket.
John had worked at the gas station for nearly 10 years.
It was not a glamorous job, and it barely paid enough to cover bills, but it allowed him the flexibility to care for Emily. Tonight, however, the gas station seemed colder than usual. The heater inside rattled and groaned, struggling to keep up with the icy air creeping in through old, thin walls. John opened the door and was greeted by a blast of freezing wind. He pulled his coat tighter, shivering, and turned on the lights inside. The store smelled faintly of gasoline and old coffee. John moved around, checking the shelves, wiping dust from the counter, and arranging snacks that hardly anyone would buy at this hour. The town was small, and most families were home, enjoying their own Christmas Eve celebrations. It was used to the emptiness, but tonight It felt heavier than usual. Even the usual hum of the refrigerator seemed lonely. As he worked, John's mind drifted back to Emily. He thought about her small face lighting up when she opened the few gifts he had managed to buy, about her laugh echoing through their small house, about her tiny hand slipping into his as they walked home from the grocery store. But she was the reason he kept going, the reason he endured long nights and cold days. But tonight he felt a sharp pang of worry. He wanted to give her something more, something that would make her feel the magic of Christmas. The bell above the door jingled suddenly, and John looked up. A woman had entered, her dark coat dusted with snow, but she moved with a quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the room carefully.
She was not dressed like someone from the town. There was a certain dignity in her posture, a calm strength in the way she carried herself.
John noticed the lines on her face, each one telling a story of a life lived with experience and endurance. She smiled faintly at him, and though it was a small gesture, it felt warm in the cold, empty store. "Good evening," she said softly. Her voice was calm, steady, and carried a certain weight that made John pay closer attention.
"Evening," John replied, slightly startled. He had not seen anyone come in for hours.
"It's cold out there tonight." "Yes," she said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Very cold." She glanced around, noticing the weak fire in the small corner heater. "May I sit for a moment?" she asked. John hesitated. He was not used to inviting strangers into the warmth of the store, especially at this late hour, but something about her calm presence felt reassuring. "Of course," he said, nodding toward a chair near the heater. She moved gracefully to the chair, seating herself carefully. John watched as she pulled out a small bundle from her coat, a simple hand-carved fire starter. She placed it on the counter and looked at him with steady eyes. "I noticed your fire," she said. "It is small, but it can grow." "Would you like a little help?" John blinked, unsure how to respond. He had never seen anyone offer something so simple yet so meaningful. He nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you," he said, his voice quieter than usual. The woman smiled, leaning over the small heater and striking the fire starter. A spark caught immediately, and the flames leapt higher, warming the corners of the room.
The difference was immediate. The room felt less empty, less lonely.
Brown. John felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, a mix of relief and something he could not quite name. "I'm glad it works," she said softly. "Fire is not just for warmth. It is for hope. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is light." John nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had always thought of fire as a practical thing, something to keep the cold at bay. But tonight, it felt different. Celebration. It felt alive, a symbol of resilience and endurance. He looked at the small flames, their dance mirrored in his own thoughts and fears, and realized that maybe, just maybe, he could give Emily more than gifts. But he could give her hope, warmth, and love. The most important things of all. The woman looked around the store, her eyes landing on a small display of holiday decorations.
She picked up a simple ornament, turning it over in her hands. "Do you celebrate Christmas?" she asked.
"Yes," John said quietly. "Not much, but we try. But it's just me and my daughter." He paused, watching her carefully. "She's only 8. I want her to have a happy Christmas, even if it's small." The woman nodded knowingly. "Happiness is not measured by what we have. It is measured by what we give, by the warmth we share, and the love we carry in our hearts." John felt a lump in his throat. Her words were simple, yet they cut through the exhaustion and worry he had carried for so long. He realized he had been so focused on what he could not provide that he had almost forgotten what truly mattered. Emily's happiness did not depend on expensive gifts or decorations. It depended on love, presence, and care, things he could give freely without hesitation. Emily stirred in her sleep at home, and John felt a sudden pang of longing. He imagined her waking up in the morning, her eyes lighting up as she saw the small tree and the simple gifts he had arranged. He imagined her sitting by the fire, her tiny hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa, and he felt a quiet determination to make this Christmas special for her, in whatever way he could. The woman noticed his thoughtful expression and smiled. "You care deeply for her," she said. "That is the most important thing. Children remember love, not things." John nodded, feeling the weight of his exhaustion lift slightly. He realized that tonight, this brief encounter, this small spark of fire, had given him a new perspective. He did not need to do everything perfectly. He just needed to be there to offer warmth and care, and to share the moments that mattered.
They spoke quietly for a while longer.
The woman shared small stories of her life, stories of survival, of enduring harsh winters, of finding joy in the smallest things. John listened intently, feeling a connection he had not expected. Her presence was calming, grounding, and inspiring. He realized that sometimes wisdom and guidance came from the most unexpected places. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the gas station the room felt alive with warmth. The heater roared softly now, fed by the small fire starter the woman had brought. The shelves and counters, once cold and empty, now seemed to glow with a quiet comfort. John felt a sense of peace he had not felt in a long time. As the night wore on, a few customers trickled in, mostly strangers passing through town. John greeted them with his usual polite smile, but he noticed a difference in himself. He felt lighter, more connected, more capable of handling the challenges of the night.
He realized that small acts of kindness, like the woman's gesture, could have a ripple effect, changing the way he approached his work, his parenting, and even his own life.
Eventually, the woman stood up, preparing to leave. She gathered her belongings and smiled at John, one last time. "Remember," she said softly, "even the smallest flame can light the darkest night. Take care of her, and take care of yourself." Inspiration. John watched her leave, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and inspiration. The door closed behind her with a soft chime, and for a moment the store was quiet again. But the fire still burned brightly, and so did the warmth in his heart. He realized that this brief encounter had shifted something inside him. He no longer felt the same heavy weight of worry and fear. He felt hope, and with hope came the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. When he finally returned home in the early hours of Christmas morning, he found Emily still asleep, her small chest rising and falling gently under her blanket. Breath. He knelt beside her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're going to have a wonderful Christmas, Pumpkin," he whispered. "I promise." For the first time in weeks, John felt truly at peace. He had been reminded of the power of connection, the importance of small acts of kindness, and the warmth that could come from unexpected sources. And he knew that no matter how modest their holiday might be, he and Emily would share a Christmas filled with love, hope, and the memory of a fire that had changed everything. The morning sunlight crept gently through the small curtains, casting soft golden light across the living room. Emily stirred, blinking her sleepy eyes as she sat up, rubbing the sleep from her face. The tiny Christmas tree leaned slightly to one side, its few ornaments sparkling in the sunlight. John watched her from the doorway, a cup of warm tea in his hands. He smiled softly, feeling a quiet warmth in his chest he had not felt in a long time.
Last night had been strange and magical, the kind of night that stayed with you long after the moments had passed.
Breaths. Emily jumped up suddenly, her excitement bubbling over.
Daddy!
Is it Christmas morning? She asked, her voice bright and full of hope. John chuckled and nodded. Yes, Pumpkin. Merry Christmas.
He set the tea on the counter and walked over to the tree, pointing at the few gifts neatly arranged underneath.
It's small, but it's for you. Emily ran to the tree and carefully picked up a small package, her eyes wide with anticipation. She tore the wrapping paper with delicate hands, revealing a simple wooden toy she had admired in the store days ago. Duh. She looked up at her father with a radiant smile, hugging him tightly.
Thank you, Daddy!
I love it! John hugged her back, feeling a sense of relief and joy. For a moment, the struggles of the past weeks faded away. The long hours, the exhaustion, the endless worry, they all seemed to matter less in this moment of connection and happiness. He realized that the true magic of Christmas did not come from the size of the gifts or the decorations, but from the love and attention he poured into each moment with Emily. After breakfast, John decided to take Emily for a walk in the town square. The streets were quiet, but the snow had left a soft white blanket over everything, making the town look peaceful and calm. Emily held his hand tightly, her small fingers slipping into his. Ooh! She pointed at the snow-covered benches and trees, giggling as she imagined tiny fairies living in the glistening white world around them. John smiled at her imagination, feeling grateful for her joy and innocence. As they walked, they passed the small shops of the town. The windows were decorated with lights and garlands, each shop trying to make the holiday feel special for the few passers-by. John noticed the tired faces of the shopkeepers, many of whom were working even on Christmas Eve. He felt a quiet empathy for them, recognizing in their faces the same fatigue and determination he carried himself. At the corner of the square, they saw a few children building a small snowman, their laughter echoing through the cold air. Emily ran toward them, her cheeks rosy with excitement. John followed more slowly, watching her interact with the other children. She shared pieces of her scarf and helped roll snowballs, her laughter blending with theirs. John felt a pang of happiness he had not allowed himself to feel in a long time. In small ways, reminded him of the importance of community and shared moments. After a while, they returned home, and John noticed a small package left on the doorstep. He picked it up, curious, and saw that it was wrapped in plain brown paper with a small note on top. He opened it carefully, revealing the hand-carved fire starter the Apache woman had left at the gas station. The note read, "Even a small flame can light the darkest night. Keep it safe. A friend." John held the fire starter in his hands, feeling a wave of gratitude and wonder. He thought about the woman's calm presence, her quiet wisdom, and the way she had touched his life in just a few hours. He realized that her gift was more than a tool for fire. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the ability to change even the most difficult circumstances. He showed it to Emily, explaining how the woman had helped him last night. Emily listened intently, her eyes wide with admiration. "She sounds amazing, Daddy," she said softly. "I wish we could meet her again." John smiled, hugging her tightly. "Maybe we will someday, Pumpkin. But even if we don't, we can remember her lessons. We can keep her fire alive in our hearts." As the day went on, John felt a shift within himself. He began to see the world differently, noticing small acts of kindness and beauty he had overlooked before. When a neighbor dropped by to deliver a plate of cookies, he greeted them warmly, feeling more connected than he had in years. When Emily giggled at a passing dog, he joined in her laughter, realizing how important it was to share joy in even the smallest moments. By the afternoon, John decided to take Emily to the small park near their house. The park was quiet, covered in snow, and the bare trees stood like silent guardians of the winter landscape. Emily ran ahead, leaving tiny footprints in the fresh snow. John followed, smiling at the way she laughed freely, unburdened by the worries that weighed on adults. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that she could still experience happiness in its purest form. While sitting on a bench, John noticed an elderly man struggling to carry a heavy bag of groceries. Without thinking, he rushed over to help, taking the bag from the man's hands. The man looked up at him, surprised and grateful.
"Thank you, son," he said.
"It's not easy out here with the cold and snow." John nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "No problem, sir." For happy holidays. He carried the bag to the man's nearby home, and as he handed it over, he realized that small gestures could have a big impact. Narration. Just as the Apache woman had given him a small fire starter that changed his night, he could now pass kindness on to others. Emily watched him with bright eyes, holding his hand tightly. "Daddy, you're like a hero," she said. John laughed softly, feeling the truth of her words. He was not a hero in the traditional sense, but he was someone who could make a difference in small ways. And for Emily, that was enough. When they returned home, John decided to start a small fire in the fireplace. Using the woman's fire starter, he struck a spark, and the flames leapt to life, filling the room with warmth and light. Emily watched in awe, her eyes reflecting the dancing fire. John sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. See, pumpkin. Even a small fire can grow strong. Just like hope. Emily nodded, her small hands resting on his.
I understand, Daddy.
"We can keep hope alive, right?"
Yes.
John said softly, feeling a lump in his throat. "We can always keep hope alive." The rest of the afternoon passed in a quiet, gentle rhythm.
John and Emily prepared a simple lunch together, laughing as they spilled a little flour and butter. They decorated cookies with colorful icing, sharing stories and making memories. Burns. John noticed that the burdens he had carried for so long felt lighter now. The presence of hope, warmth, and connection had changed something within him. As evening approached, John reflected on the Apache woman's visit. Her words and actions had opened his eyes to the power of small gestures, of human connection, and of resilience in the face of hardship.
I realized that he did not need to solve every problem or give Emily everything she wanted.
He needed to be present, to share moments of warmth, and to teach her the value of kindness and hope. When night fell, the house was filled with the soft glow of the fire, the twinkling lights of the small Christmas tree, and the quiet breathing of a sleeping Emily. John sat in his chair, holding the fire starter and thinking about the day's events. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the lessons he had learned and the love he shared with his daughter. He whispered softly to himself, "We'll be okay. We'll make it through anything, as long as we have hope in each other." In that moment, John understood that life's most meaningful gifts were not material. They were love, resilience, connection, and the courage to see hope, even in the darkest times. And as he watched the fire flicker gently in the hearth, he knew that the spark the Apache woman had given him would continue to grow, lighting not only their home, but also their hearts, now and in the years to come. The next morning, John woke early to the soft sound of birds chirping outside his window. The sun had barely risen, but the world already seemed brighter than the day before. Narration. Emily was still asleep, her small body curled under her blanket, and John paused to watch her for a moment. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for it. Last night and the day that had followed had been unlike any Christmas he could remember. Something had shifted in him, quietly but profoundly. The fire the Apache woman had left behind was more than just warmth for the room. It had sparked a change in his heart.
John got up and dressed quietly, careful not to wake Emily.
He decided to take a walk through their small neighborhood before starting the day. The air was crisp and cold, the kind of cold that made your cheeks rosy and your lungs feel alive. Snow crunched softly beneath his boots as he stepped outside, and he noticed that the streets seemed almost magical under the early morning light. He waved to neighbors as he passed, greeting them with a warmth he had not shown in a long time. As he walked, John thought about the woman's words. Even the smallest flame can light the darkest night. They had stayed with him since she said them. He realized that she had not just given him a fire starter. She had given him a perspective, a way to see the world differently. He had been so focused on what he could not provide for Emily that he had forgotten how much power he had in simple acts of kindness and attention. Returning home, John found Emily awake and dressed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Good morning, Daddy," she exclaimed. "Can we play outside today?" John smiled and nodded. Yes, Pumpkin. Let's go see what the snow has left for us." They stepped outside together, and Emily immediately ran to the small yard behind their house. Her laughter rang through the air as she made snow angels and gathered handfuls of snow to throw gently at John. He laughed too, feeling the tension and worry of the past weeks melting away. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to simply enjoy the moment, fully present in the joy of his daughter's company. After a while, John suggested they take the small sled he had found last year and make a trip to the nearby hill.
Emily's eyes lit up at the idea, and they both trudged through the snow, pulling the sled behind them.
Breaths. Other children were already there, laughing and racing down the hill. Emily ran to join them, and John followed more slowly, watching her interact with the other children. He noticed how easily she connected, how naturally she made friends and shared in the joy of simple play. Watching her reminded him of the importance of community, of human connection, and of the bonds that form through shared experiences. Later, as they returned home, John noticed a few neighbors struggling with snow-covered sidewalks. Without thinking, he grabbed the shovel and began helping them clear the walkways. Emily helped too, laughing as she tried to scoop the snow with her small hands. One neighbor, an elderly woman, looked at them with gratitude. "Thank you, John," she said warmly. "It's not easy to keep up with all this snow, especially in winter." John nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. "It's no problem," he said. "We're happy to help." As the day continued, John began to notice how small acts of kindness rippled outwards. Right to helping a neighbor led to a smile, a friendly conversation, and a sense of shared community. Each gesture, no matter how minor, seemed to create warmth that reached far beyond the immediate moment. The Apache woman's presence, though brief, had reminded him that one person could indeed make a difference. Back at home, John and Emily prepared a simple lunch together. They chopped vegetables and stirred soup, laughing as they spilled a little here and there. Emily asked questions about the woman who had given them the fire starter, and John answered honestly, sharing what he remembered about her calm presence and quiet wisdom. Emily listened intently, fascinated by the story. "Daddy," she said softly, "I want to be kind like her too." John smiled, feeling a deep pride. "You already are, Pumpkin," he said.
Kindness isn't just about big things. It's about helping others, sharing joy and caring for people around you.
After lunch, they decided to take the leftover cookies they had baked to a few neighbors. Emily carried a small basket, and John walked beside her, feeling a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. They knocked on doors, offering cookies and holiday wishes, and each time they were met with smiles and gratitude. Some neighbors invited them in briefly, and they shared small conversations filled with laughter and warmth. John realized that the Apache woman had shown him the value of connection, and now he was seeing it unfold in real time. That evening, John sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance as Emily played quietly nearby with a small wooden toy. Reflected on the day's events, feeling a sense of calm satisfaction. The ripple effect of kindness, of attention, and of care was real. It was not just about giving gifts or having a perfect holiday. It was about being present, noticing others, and making a small but meaningful difference in the world. John thought about the lessons the woman had shared: resilience, hope, and the power of small gestures. He realized that he could apply these lessons not just to Emily, but to his life as a whole. He could reach out to friends he had lost touch with, offer support to those in need, and approach each day with a sense of purpose and care. The spark she had ignited within him was growing stronger, spreading warmth throughout his life. As night fell, John and Emily sat together by the fire. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, and John wrapped his arm around her. "Daddy," she said quietly, "today was perfect." "Thank you for being with me." John kissed the top of her head, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "No, Pumpkin," he whispered. "Thank you. You've reminded me what really matters." The quiet moments stretched into the night, and John realized that the Apache woman's influence had already begun to change their lives in ways he had never expected. It was not just about a fire starter or a warm gesture. It was about seeing the world differently, embracing kindness, and allowing hope to grow even in the smallest corners of life. He knew that these lessons would continue to shape him and Emily in the days, months, and years to come. The ripple effect of one brief encounter had already begun, and he could see the ways it would touch others, the neighbors he helped, the friends he would reconnect with, and the lessons he would pass on to Emily. John thought about the future with a sense of optimism he had not felt in a long time. There would still be challenges, long nights, and moments of exhaustion, but he now understood that hope, connection, and love were far more powerful than any hardship. Emily's laughter, the warmth of their small home, and the simple joys they shared were proof that even in the darkest times, light could be found. As he finally prepared to rest for the night, John placed the fire starter carefully on the mantel, a symbol of the spark that had ignited change in their lives. He looked at Emily sleeping peacefully and whispered once more, "We'll keep the fire alive, Pumpkin. Always." Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering the streets in a quiet blanket of white. Inside, the warmth of the fire, the love between father and daughter, and the lessons of a wise stranger created a glow that could not be dimmed. John realized that the world was full of possibilities, that kindness could travel far beyond a single gesture, and that even a brief moment of connection could leave a lasting impact. And in that small house surrounded by snow, firelight, and the quiet contentment of a day well lived, John understood that life's most meaningful gifts were not material. They were love, resilience, hope, and the courage to pass those gifts on to others. The first light of morning filtered softly through the curtains, filling the small living room with a warm glow. John stirred from his sleep and looked over at Emily, who was still tucked under her blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm. The quiet of the morning was peaceful, and for the first time in many weeks, John felt truly rested. The fire from the night before had burned down to gentle embers, but the warmth that left in the room and in his heart remained. But John got up quietly, careful not to wake Emily yet. He poured a cup of tea and stepped to the window, looking out over the snow-covered street. The town was waking slowly. A neighbor shoveled the sidewalk across the road. Children laughed as they ran past, and the soft hum of the morning filled the air. John felt a calm sense of purpose. Life had changed subtly, quietly, in the past few days, and he could feel it in every small detail around him. The fire the Apache woman had brought into their lives had done more than warm a cold night. It had shifted something inside him that would never fade. He returned to Emily's side and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Morning, Pumpkin," he said softly. Emily opened her eyes, still sleepy but smiling. "Good morning, Daddy. Can we have cocoa by the fire?" she asked. John chuckled. Of course, Pumpkin. Let's make it the best cocoa ever. As they prepared the cocoa together, John reflected on everything that had happened since the woman's visit. He thought about the spark of hope she had given him, the small fire that had grown into a broader warmth in his life. Realized that her lessons about resilience, kindness, and the power of small gestures were now part of his daily life. They were no longer just words or symbols. They were actions, choices, and a way of seeing the world.
Emily poured the cocoa carefully into their mugs, smiling proudly at her accomplishment. John added a small sprinkle of cinnamon, and they carried the mugs to the living room, sitting together by the fire.
The warmth of the flames reflected in their faces, and John watched Emily take a sip, her eyes lighting up in delight. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that he was giving her more than a drink or a simple moment of comfort. He was giving her the lessons of love, hope, and resilience. The morning passed gently. John suggested they take a walk to the small park, and Emily eagerly agreed. They bundled up in coats, scarves, and mittens, stepping into the crisp winter air. The park was quiet, covered in soft snow, and the trees stood bare, yet beautiful in their simplicity. Emily ran ahead, leaving tiny footprints in the snow, and John followed, enjoying the sight of her laughter filling the air. Along the way, they encountered neighbors and friends. John greeted them warmly, offering help where needed. When a young mother struggled to carry a bag of groceries, John stepped forward without hesitation, taking the weight from her hands. Emily helped too, handing small items from the bag. The woman smiled, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, John," she said. "You're always so thoughtful." John nodded, feeling the truth of the Apache woman's lesson in action. Small acts of kindness, he realized, had power far beyond what he could see in the moment. Each gesture built connection, trust, and warmth, not just for himself and Emily, but for the people around them. He felt a sense of pride that went beyond accomplishment. It was a deeper, more meaningful pride, the kind that comes from making the world a little better, one small step at a time. As they continued walking, John noticed how Emily's confidence and joy had grown. She greeted the other children at the park with a smile, sharing snowballs and laughter. Her excitement and openness reminded him that the lessons she learned now would stay with her for a lifetime. She was absorbing not only the joy of the season, but also the example of kindness and generosity he was showing her. He realized that through his actions, she would learn the same truths the Apache woman had taught him, that even small acts could make a lasting difference. Returning home, John and Emily prepared a simple lunch together. They sang quietly while chopping vegetables and stirring the pot of soup, their voices blending with the gentle warmth of the home. Break in imagination. Emily asked questions about the woman who had brought the fire starter. "Daddy, why do you think she came to help us?" John smiled, stirring the soup.
"I think she knew we needed a little spark, Pumpkin. Sometimes people cross our path just to remind us that hope and kindness still exist.
And sometimes we are the ones who need to pass it on."
Emily nodded thoughtfully.
"So we can pass it on too, right?" "Yes," John said, taking her small hand in his. "We can always pass it on." As the afternoon drew near, John decided to visit some of the neighbors they had helped earlier. He carried a small basket of cookies with Emily, sharing greetings and smiles along the way. The children played together while parents exchanged warm words, and John noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere of the neighborhood. There was more warmth, more connection, and a sense of community that had not been there before. The spark the Apache woman had ignited in him had grown and spread, touching others in ways he could never have predicted. Returning home once more, John took a quiet moment to reflect. The small house, the modest decorations, and the simple gifts were enough because they were filled with love and attention. He realized that life's most meaningful gifts were not material. They were moments, connections, and acts of care. He had learned to see the value in small things, in the laughter of his daughter, in the smiles of neighbors, and in the warmth of shared experiences.
As evening fell, John and Emily sat together by the fireplace once more.
The room glowed with soft light, and the fire starter the Apache woman had given them rested safely on the mantel. Emily leaned against her father, her eyes heavy with sleep, but still shining with happiness. John held her close, feeling a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. "Daddy," Emily whispered, "do you think the lady with the fire will come back?" John shook his head gently, breaths. "Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But what she gave us isn't just about her visit.
It's about what we do with it. We carry it in our hearts and share it with others."
Emily nodded slowly, understanding in her own childlike way. "I'll keep it alive, Daddy," she said softly.
"I know you will, Pumpkin," John said, kissing the top of her head. "We both will." That night, as John watched Emily drift into a deep sleep, he thought about the lessons he had learned. Life would not always be easy. There would be long nights, cold mornings, and moments of doubt. But he now understood that hope, kindness, and love were stronger than any hardship. The Apache woman had shown him that even the smallest spark could grow into a flame that lights the darkest path. Brace. And now he had that fire within himself, ready to face whatever came next.
In the days and weeks that followed, John carried this new perspective into every part of his life. He reached out to old friends, helping them reconnect with the community. He spent more time with Emily, savoring every small moment of joy and laughter. He offered kindness and support to neighbors, co-workers, and strangers alike. Each act, no matter how small, reinforced the lessons he had learned, that life was about connection, love, and the courage to share warmth with others. Emily grew more confident and joyful with each passing day. She learned to see the value in helping others, sharing kindness, and appreciating the simple joys around her. John watched with pride as she absorbed these lessons naturally, understanding that she was carrying forward the spark of hope and love they had received together. Months later, on another cold winter morning, John looked out the window and thought about the woman who had changed their lives so quietly but profoundly. He did not know her name, and he did not know if he would ever see her again.
But he felt her presence in everything he did, in every act of kindness and every moment of connection. Her influence had become a permanent part of their lives, a reminder that even brief encounters can have lasting impact.
John realized that the fire she had brought was more than physical warmth. It was the warmth of hope, of resilience, of love shared between people. Breaths. It was a reminder that life's greatest gifts are often invisible, found in moments of care, understanding, and shared humanity. And as he watched Emily play nearby, laughing freely in the snow-covered yard, he knew that the spark she had ignited in them would continue to grow for the rest of their lives. With that thought, John sat by the window sipping his tea and feeling gratitude fill every corner of his heart. The world was still challenging, still unpredictable, but he had learned the power of hope and the importance of small acts of kindness. And most importantly, he knew that he and Emily could face it together, carrying forward the lessons of a stranger who had shown them that even the smallest flame can change everything. In that quiet, snow-covered town, inside a small home filled with warmth, love, and hope, John understood the most profound truth of all. Life's most powerful changes often begin with the smallest sparks, and those sparks, when nurtured, can illuminate not only one life but the lives of everyone touched by its warmth.